Hello, thanks for joining us today. We're at the fourth session of Industry.live's podcast. We're really excited to have Simona Neufeld. She's an expert in AI, has a ton of experience working with data and AI, and has joined us today to talk to us about how businesses and the world is understanding and leveraging AI for work. Hi, Simona.
Hi, Sumek. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Could you take a quick minute and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I bring a financial services background in governance, portfolio leadership, and change management across major banks and insurers, including TD, Manulife, Deloitte, and BMO. And currently I'm at a firm called Digital Shift, and they're kind of a boutique AI consultancy that does production ready prototypes. And so they differentiate themselves because they can move the prototype that they develop into production as opposed to just proof of concept.
From your vantage point, how is AI influencing the way banks, financial services companies think about governance, risk, and delivery of technology portfolios when it comes to AI?
So I would add that AI. So first of all, I'm going to say I'm not necessarily like you deem me as an AI expert. I think that AI is evolving so rapidly right now from what it was to where it sits today that I'm not sure that saying maybe there are some people that are AI experts, and there are definitely some people at my firm that have been working with AI for 6 years and have done some revolutionary things. I definitely have background in, large scale transformations and data and, looking across major organizations to do that and their applications and their infrastructure and cloud. So I just want to give you that context. But that being said, I have been kind of in the loop with the banking world in terms of what they've been doing. And the truth of the matter is, like, AI or artificial intelligence isn't actually new. Like, it seems like it's new, and I'm sure you know this as well. But NLP has been around for a long time, natural language processing and automation as well. And so everything used to be sort of digital first, and now it's AI first. And I mean, there's even debate about what that means because that's controversial in itself. Essentially, it's kind of we're saying that the world has fallen in love with AI as it sits today, but it's been kind of around for a long time in different formats, and just people are learning more about it now because it's impacting them. It's becoming more sophisticated. And in terms of like different organizations and banks and what they're doing, I think it really depends on the organization. So all of the banks seem to be building in-house teams and capabilities. However, they're also have to outsource to large vendors such as Databricks or Microsoft and other providers, who understand like LLM, like large language model capabilities. Right. And then in terms of how to customize those large language models for the organization to access it, they're often doing some build in-house, but there's also providers. I mean, so Digital Shift also works with a variety of providers that can help to customize the large language model solutions as well. And these would be in distinct areas, leveraging use cases or proof of concepts. The other thing is that in terms of like chat GPT, because it's open AI, many financial institutions have their own version of chat GPT. So it's proprietary, and often they're leveraging Copilot to enhance productivity. And then there's like the 3 A's: automation, assistance, and now everyone's talking about agents. So essentially, AI adoption in banking and financial services is accelerating, but it's not really just a technology shift. It's a governance and culture shift for the entire organization. So what that means is it's highly dependent on data literacy, culture, and trust. And they're definitely just as critical, if not more critical, than the models themselves.
So, with that in mind, it seems like AI introduces a lot of new risks. So, things like bias, explainability, model risk, and obviously being in that space, banking, obviously a lot of regulatory uncertainty when it comes to either compliance, but also with the laws being changed and new laws coming in to protect different kinds of interests. So, how are governance teams and teams that you've been part of in the past and teams that you're trying to help understand this? How are they dealing with this?
So that's a great question. only 1/3 of organizations today, and I don't think that's just financial institutions, have AI governance in place. So there's a major leadership opportunity to shape how AI is governed and trusted going forward. Explainability, bias, and model risk are now at the forefront, especially with the explosion of Gen AI and LLMs, as I was discussing before. Traditional model risk frameworks were not built for Gen AI, which introduces risks such as hallucination, bias, drift, and fairness, and requires new continuous governance models. We're also moving towards agile embedded governance, where model drift, hallucination, and bias are continuously monitored, not just reviewed once a year. I think it's really important to note that governance is often seen as a roadblock or a barrier, but in multiple examples given by industry leaders, they often see it as an accelerator to be leveraged in the use case for responsible AI. And the other thing is, only 25% of AI projects deliver efficiency gains today. So governance maturity is a differentiator between success and failure, but efficiency doesn't necessarily mean ROI. So embedding governance directly into model pipelines is critical. So, and trust absolutely has to be earned. The AI or the LLM or the Gen AI or, in the future, the agent needs to be checked and monitored constantly, and it can't be relied on blindly. And that's the whole, focus. And I think you're going to get there with the human in the loop, which is huge.
Okay. So a lot of banks, a lot of large organizations, they have an agile environment. So in an agile, fast moving environment, how do you balance the pace of AI with the need for driving strong oversight, governance, accountability? How do you do that?
I love that question because just being a person privy to agile acceleration in banking, I think they like agile is kind of seen as a key component in implementing AI. But at the same time, the majority of programs that are delivered today in a financial services environment, because it's highly regulated, as you also indicated, and customer data is a key concern, and privacy. The majority of work that's delivered in an agile fashion is not AI, right? And so I think that to predicate like everything, essentially it's pretty new. There's risk. We talked about hallucination, bias, etc. And organizations aren't necessarily that comfortable with it. There's a lot of legacy applications. There's a lot of unstructured data. And there's a lot of conversations even just about how to access the data and how clean the data is and does that matter. So, when it comes to implementing anything around AI, it's really start small, walk before you run, diversify your path. And what that means is, so you pick your use cases that you think are going to, monetize some value, and then they're across the business process, like end to end, right? And it's typically 3 to 4 AI projects maximum. And I think that's a US figure, by the way. I don't even think we're doing that in Canada. 3 to 4 AI projects maximum per business unit, right? If you really want to be successful. And then I think the other piece that's critical, and that's why we're talking about risk and governance, is that it's important not to skip what steps. And at the same time, people are figuring out what the steps are. Part of that is that you need to understand what can be digitized, what the guardrails are, notionally prevent bias and hallucinations. So, because in theory, we're going to say that good AI is predicated on good data, but not perfect data, because you can enrich your data with AI as well. So that whole garbage in, garbage out concept is kind of not as relevant today as it was last year. And that's a good thing. So on top of that, it's important to put the data in the cloud, to understand what's on-prem, because you're always going to have a combination of data in the cloud and on-prem. Can't really get away from that because of the regulator requirements and the risk requirements. And also to understand what the cost is of the data in the cloud, because it has to be manageable for the organization. I think another key component is that it's important to co-create. So you often hear about AI teams or maybe tech teams, things like that. But actually, the most successful AI initiatives or projects are built upon the capability to work with your partners, work with partners across the organization, and integrate also, definitely your business partners and your users into the entire project from the get-go. In terms of the way banks are doing it today, they have these POCs, and then there's a 15 to 22% early adoption based on the initial POC across their businesses. So in terms of AI, choosing technology is pretty easy. And the biggest challenge is to change people's mindsets in the organization and for them to adopt the AI. And it needs to be a safe build, but it also needs to be scalable, right? You don't want to just build for one business process. You want to replicate and repeat your success, or you want to have learnings and then, continuous improvement on those learnings. And I think another component on that is that you cannot underestimate the amount of change required. It's very hard to navigate change. You have to start thinking about how it's going to impact the organization and multiple lines of business and what the end-to-end process will look like after the change. So in some cases, organizations have put together like roadshows, like analytics people and change management roadshows, just to demonstrate the success of the AI initiatives that are underway or what the objectives of those initiatives are, so that the organization at large has a better understanding of what a technology or the AI team or the data team is trying to accomplish. And I think the other piece here is, if you think about how difficult it is to navigate the change, you have to choose leaders that are AI ready and then define the fit for AI and monetization opportunities in your use cases. Because ultimately, like I said, you want to focus on maintaining scalability. So it's players, people, technology, and lots of change. And the truth is, nobody's ever going to get the governance or architecture correctly when they start, but you need to start the governance alongside the development, not after the fact. So it's compliance by design.
Wow, compliance by design. Um, Interesting, because it's something that a lot of leaders seem to be talking about these days. It's something you've heard. Um, at some of the top forums in the last couple of months. What role do you think human oversight and human feedback should play? When banks adopt AI-driven technologies, AI-driven tools and processes.
So 80% of AI project failures are linked to gaps in data quality, governance, and organizational readiness. So, and as leaders invest in AI, they must also prepare their people, processes, and infrastructure to ensure these initiatives drive measurable business outcomes. One of the strongest success patterns I see is building AI literacy and embedding governance from the beginning, as I indicated. So the governance must evolve dynamically with the AI lifecycle, and responsible AI is not a once and done checklist. AI is there to augment, not replace human decision making. And that's key. So the concept is human first, AI enabled is the guiding principle. And that means humans must remain in the loop, especially in critically regulated decisions. So the risk is, without thoughtful design, Gen AI can automate away judgment and embed bias. The goal is to design AI systems that amplify human expertise and not displace it. And so the idea is, in many cases, there's something called an AI council, where the organization is engaged and it's everyone's job to do AI together: legal, risk, technology, and business stakeholders. So you have to kind of see it as a team sport. The CIO doesn't, or the chief data officer does not have entire perspective or diversity. And so you have to kind of encourage that perspective and bring the other groups into the fold. And in a sense, it's kind of like a formula in Formula One. Your pit crew is how you're going to win, and data is your fuel. And you have to isolate your data to solve your problem and build an AI tool that accommodates less perfect data.
So you've worked to harmonize risk reporting so far. So do you think traditional risk reporting frameworks capture AI-related risk efficiently, or do you think something needs to change for businesses to capture that risk?
So I think responsible AI is not optional. It's a board level risk concern. And so I mentioned it earlier. There has to be a thought process of compliance by design, and governance is embedded in your solution from the beginning. And in fact, when you're building a platform, is actually conceptually and realistically, there are products where governance is automated. Right? There are providers that provide automated governance as part of the products and part of their offerings. And I think from an organization perspective, similarly, they have to work with principles from a governance and architecture standpoint as whatever they're designing for AI purposes is being built. And then there needs to be a box to play in for the data. And so the data citizens have a sandbox, and the frameworks have to be robust enough to embrace the opportunities of AI. It has to be a flexible type of approach to the extent that it's not necessarily just about the rules. I think in governance, we've often been focused very much on rules and, reporting. And someone actually said, and I thought it was really well expressed. And he said in one of the conferences I attended, if there's an issue with your data or your application or your AI, it doesn't matter how many JIRA reports you produce. You need to be able to fix what isn't working. So I think that how you relate to risk is that, as I indicated earlier, it's not static. It's continuous. And the accountability isn't kind of just at the BU level, it's at the board level. And there needs to be dashboarding and reports that are created that adhere to that level, similar to delivery risk reporting, that go up to the board, and then there's transparency as well within that. And I think what I said earlier, sort of the top AI risks to monitor: hallucinations, bias and fairness, model drift, and security and adversary.
Okay. So when you really think of AI and promising early uses of AI, what comes to mind, especially in the banking and financial services industry where you've had a strong role in the past? What do you see as early AI successes?
So in banks, they have Gen AI sort of co-pilots and assistants for in-house decision making and for customer service and employee enablement. I think one of the examples I spoke to earlier is pretty, like, contact centers were like a foray again for a lot of the banks to implement AI solutions, and it's been successful. So in terms of the use cases for agentic AI driving multi-step workflows and leveraging RAG, retrieval automated generation use cases, it's particular to fraud detection, risk analysis, and document processing, in insurance, claims, and legal documents. So the AI agents aren't, even though we're talking about agentic AI as being new, and I think it's definitely progressing. It's just that in the past, they didn't have large language models and techniques to employ those agents. So they weren't intelligent enough. They couldn't learn. And that's why there's so much more talk about agentic AI today than there was previously.
Do you see a shift in how leaders are funding AI projects, especially in financial services industries where funds are obviously available, but choices are more conservative among leaders to fund AI solutions?
There's the whole and I talked about it before, automation assistants, agents. So Gen AI assistants for internal operations, contact centers, call summarization, document workflows. So looking at different personas, evaluating policies, helping humans to make, more informed decisions. And, some of these assistants, they can like drink up, they said, like, 8,000 or 10,000 policies at a time. So there's a lot to be sort of gained from using these assistants, but the human in the loop still has to determine if the information is accurate and is pulling from the right sources. There's fraud management, and that's a scalable multi-step process, but that's really critical today. And I think that financial institutions are investing in AI for fraud. And then there's risk analysis, the AI-driven scenario modeling, and early warning indicators.
I'm trying to understand if you see a challenge with getting funds or securing funds or getting budgets for AI now versus in the past. So are leaders more keen to invest in AI projects?
Well, that's a really good question. I would say I think that in general, it's a cost constrained environment. So, and many of like the focus areas are, regulatory or compliance in nature. And so it's hard to maintain a bit of that balance. You have to kind of innovate, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you're complying. And so you think about it from that perspective. And I think that's why, it's so important for fraud or for regulatory or for compliance reasons to kind of implement AI right now, because you're almost killing two birds with one stone. And then, I think the funding question is probably as similar for AI as it is for anything else. In a large organization, you're competing for funds, and it's dependent on your use case and, your monetization of the value that can be provided. But at the end of the day, organizations are just they're not sophisticated yet enough to implement more than a few AI projects, because they haven't learned necessarily what they need to. And again, it's the regulatory environment as it is. They can't make mistakes with customer data.
Um, AI is obviously constantly changing. What wasn't possible yesterday is now possible. There are, umpteen examples of VO3, for example, from Google, which allows people to generate real life like video. There are, a lot of examples from cloud, which, used to not be able to generate clean code, and now they're able to generate really, really good, sophisticated code. So AI is obviously constantly changing. What do you see being a priority for leaders in terms of understanding AI? What are leaders doing today so that they are, up to speed with what's happening in the AI world? And do you see many leaders prioritizing that, or just a handful who will obviously lead the space?
So, right, I can't, I mean, so I can speak to what I've learned from the leaders that I've spoken to or I've heard, talk about their experience. And there is a significant amount of resistance to AI. And however, at the leadership level, you might often hear that there's all these ideas like, we need to implement AI, but nobody actually knows what that means or what's best for like, how is that going to actually serve the organization? You shouldn't, like, even if you can implement it, that doesn't mean you should, right? So I think foundationally, when the tech teams are looking at the ideas and evaluating the ideas and business casing, and they're looking at it from an AI perspective, all of these things they're being considered. But also, it's important to partner with leaders that are motivated to learn about AI and can be taught and want to be fully integrated in the process. Otherwise, the risk of failure is much more significant.
How are you hand-holding organizations through this process and journey?
So that's a good question. So the organization I recently joined, everyone comes from a consulting background at PricewaterhouseCoopers and Infotech Research Group, CGI, Ernst& Young previously. So there's a lot of expertise in business architecture, strategy, and large scale technology implementation and transformation. And then on top of that, they've also become experts in AI driven solutions and delivery. And so I think the service offering that is provided is essentially kind of, and I have also business architecture, technology transformation, and governance. And so the idea is, you have sort of a baseline understanding that AI is a component of like everything else, because you can't do it in isolation. And so you need to understand technology. You need to know what the business strategy and those priorities are, and what the capabilities and how they map back to those applications, where the data is sitting, right? And where it needs to be sitting, and how the governance works. And then what are the right types of solutions to solve the problems that the organizations are facing?
How do you personally stay up to speed with AI?
So in my case, I read newsletters, I listen to some podcasts. I go to a lot of conferences and listen to industry leaders speak about what they're doing. There's definitely a lot of people in financial services that speak to their approach and their success stories and their war stories within the banking world. I find it even more compelling to listen to the providers. So, if you think about, like I mentioned, Databricks, Digital Shift works with Data IQ. So, and The thing about the providers is they're much further along in the journey because that's their day-to-day business model. And so they implement it internally first with their own organization, with their own applications, with their own data. And then as a result of that, they've also built these solutions. And if you think about it, so what they're going to tell you about how to manage your data and source your data and do your governance and unstructured data is going to be very, very different than someone working in a large organization and building everything in-house with these massive teams that don't necessarily have the expertise.
So, looking 1 to 3 years out from now, where do you think governance in banking will sort of need to focus? And what do you think about responsible AI adoption in 1 to 3 years from now?
As I discussed earlier, it's about embedding AI literacy and governance fluency at the board level because the boards have to own the responsible AI outcomes and including, agentic AI and RAG governance because the traditional model risk frameworks are insufficient. And finally, to prioritize human amplification because governance must ensure that AI empowers, not replaces, human decision makers. So the future of governance is agile, accountable, and human centric. Responsible AI will be as critical as financial risk management.
So, what advice would you give to other governance and risk professionals who are your peers but are just starting to grapple with AI?
Start small, start now. Build AI literacy and governance muscles early. Don't wait for regulations. Build responsible AI as a competitive differentiator. Build cross functional AI governance councils with risk, compliance, data, IT, and the business who are at the table from the beginning. Invest in AI literacy, governance fluency is your strategic asset. And again, design for human amplification, center your AI strategy on empowering human outcomes. You have to amplify your talent and leverage their skills in the best way possible. And in a sense, it's the idea is you have to imagine what could go right, but govern for what could go wrong.
Okay. Thank you so much, Simona, for all of that. Is there any question that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
No, I think we covered a lot of concepts. So I hope this was helpful and meaningful for your audience. And certainly, if anyone's interested, they're welcome to find me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/my name, Simona Neufeld, because I'd love to hear perspectives and keep this important dialogue going. And it's a journey that needs to be shaped together.
Thank you so much, Simona. It was a pleasure having you. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll come back with another episode of Industry.live next week.